Hi, can I do an iced Americano? Yep, have a nice day. Thank you. Alrighty boys, we can get the day started now. This straw is gigantic. Can you see this right now? Alrighty. So in my last video where I talked about 5 things that I hate and 5 things that I love about my Mk6 GTI, I said that I wanted to make a video about who I thought this car was meant for, or who I thought should consider buying one of these in the used market. Volkswagen introduced the GTI in 1975 at the Frankfurt Motor Show, and the reason that they designed this car was they took their already extremely reliable platform of the Golf and wanted to turn it up a notch. What that meant was an engine that had more power, tighter suspension, an overall better driving experience, but still keeping that reliability and practicality at the heart of the car. I think that Volkswagen has done a really good job at sticking to the roots of what the GTI is, and that's what drew me to the car in the first place. I originally purchased my GTI when I was a college student. I was going to a university that was actually in a downtown area, but I wanted a car for when I came home and wanted to go on a trip, or when I knew I would get internships and things like that. I'd have something that I could drive, it would be reliable, but also something that would be fun with some aftermarket support too, so I could kind of make it my own. I think that's relative to anyone that's looking into the market for a GTI. I guess it wouldn't really make sense to not mention its competitors if we're going to talk about why you might consider this car in the first place. When I was originally looking to get a car, and ever since I was a young kid really, I was always a huge fan of the WRX wagon. I liked the Mazda Speed 3 too, but the whole vroom vroom boom thing kind of scared me, although I know that might not be as true as the saying goes, but the WRX wagon was just always something that really spoke to me. I loved that rumble of the 4-cylinder turbo. I loved the practicality idea, having that hatchback space. And also all-wheel drive was a big draw to me because, like I said, I'm a snowboarder and I like to just do things outdoors. So to me that always made a lot of sense. When it came time to me to actually start to look for cars though, the WRX was just a little bit out of my price range, and so I decided to look outside of the WRX specifically, at what other options there would be. I knew about the GTI, but I didn't know that much about it at the time. I knew that it was front-wheel drive, I knew that you could get them in 2 doors or 4 doors, I knew that they came with either a DSG, the automatic 6-speed with paddle shifters, or a 6-speed manual like what I ended up going with. But I didn't really know too much outside of that. I wasn't a huge Volkswagen guy. My parents never really had Volkswagen cars, and so it was sort of an unknown territory. I went and test drove a Mk 5 GTI that actually had a DSG, and I really liked that car. I was honestly so impressed at just how it felt to be on the road. I had only ever driven Chevy Cruzes and I think Civics and maybe a truck or something like that beforehand. So to me, that felt like an entirely different driving experience. It brought me back to days of when I used to go go-karting with my dad and things like that. It was just that quick, nimble driving experience that I realized I was really looking for in the car that I was going to end up buying. I think anyone that's considering getting a GTI today should be looking for a few things in particular if this car is going to end up being their choice. If you want something quick, relatively reliable, with good aftermarket support so you can make it your own, tight suspension if you're, in an area that maybe has some winding roads, things of that nature, but also don't have 30 or 40,000 to go look at Audi S models or other cars in those categories, then the GTI may be the place that you want to look. I think the GTI brings a lot of German refinement in the way that the interior is built, the ergonomics of how everything is oriented around the driver, but it's not going to hit the bank the same way going to get an older 4 Series BMW or Mercedes car would. Some of the other competitors that are in the market right now may be the Subaru BRZ. It's a little bit different, that's rear-wheel drive, but if we think about something that has good aftermarket support, a good driving experience, the ability to get a 6-speed manual if you want one, I think that's a good competitor for this car. Another one is obviously the WRX, that seems the most obvious. But outside of that, and I guess the Mazda Speed 3, there's not a ton that really falls into this category, at least in the States. practicality of a GTI is what really sets it apart from something like the BRZ. I've driven a BRZ, and if you are someone that really doesn't care as much as having space and is really just looking for a pure driving experience, that car is awesome, especially with the 6-speed manual. I've actually gotten the chance to drive both that and the automatic. Even if you don't know how to drive manual yet, I promise you, go and just get someone to teach you to drive manual. That manual transmission in the BRZ and the FRS is a fantastic transmission. I don't know how much power it can hold or anything like that, but as far as just the actual shifting experience, it feels great. Now, if you're someone that wants a little bit more practicality, maybe you like to do activities like snowboarding or even biking. I've put a mountain bike in the back of my GTI before. I actually have golf clubs in the back right now. I hope that those are not rattling around in the video, but I like to golf. I'm actually passing a driving range right now. But if you're someone that's looking for a little bit more of that practicality aspect and be able to fit 4 people much more comfortably than you're able to in something like the FRS, the GTI would be a great option. As far as fuel economy goes, I would say that this car does about what I expect. I'm on a stage 1 APR tune right now, and honestly, I don't think it made that much of a difference being stock tune to my stage 1 tune as far as just overall fuel economy. On average, I do a mix of back roads and some city driving, on the highway every once in a while, but a lot of red light to red light type of driving in the suburbs. And I average about 22, 23 miles per gallon. I may be able to do a little better than that if I don't get on it, but that's part of the fun of having a tune, I think, right? Another thing to talk about with the GTI is the clutch. I actually learned to drive manual in my dad's old GT500. He doesn't have it anymore, but that was the first car that I ever got in that had a manual transmission. And I just remember working that clutch was extremely difficult, especially compared to getting in the GTI when I first bought this car. The clutch is extremely light. It actually has pretty good engagement, at least in my opinion. It is very light though, so you're not going to get as much engagement as something like the BRZ, for example, which has a little bit heavier of a clutch. Or even something like the WRX. I've driven a 6-speed WRX, and that car has an extremely heavy clutch, especially compared to the GTI. But overall, it still was a very good platform for me to learn on. It's extremely forgiving. It was just a great platform to learn on. So if you're someone that's really just looking to make big power and take something to the track, or looking to be the king of the street light racers or whatever, the GTI probably isn't the place for you. If you're looking for a car to be able to tweak, make your own, have a fun time while driving, and still be able to fit 4 people comfortably, this may be a great place to look. If you have any questions about the GTI or what modifications I have done and what I would and wouldn't recommend, definitely feel free to leave a comment down below. It would help me out a ton to hear what you guys are looking to talk about. Some things to look out for if you're going to buy a GTI. The Mk6 model year started in 2010 and ran until 2015-2016 time range. From 2010 to 2012, they actually had a timing chain tensioner issue. It's a pretty big issue, and if it does go, you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get things repaired on it. So that would definitely be one of the main things that I would ask someone if you're going to check out one of these. If it's a 2010 to 2012, make sure you ask, or at least get under the car and look to see if it has the updated timing chain tensioner. That's essential. Another common problem with the Mk6 GTI is the intake manifold. As best I understand it, there's basically a sensor that is faulty. I think it's made out of plastic or something along those lines. It just wasn't a great design from factory. Volkswagen actually replaced my intake manifold under warranty, and that was while I had a tune, so let's just not really tell anyone about that. Although I don't think the tune actually had anything to do with it. Just from reading in forums and everything, it seemed like it was pretty common whether you're tuned or not. But luckily, they took care of that, so I don't have that issue anymore. It has the updated sensor in it now. I'll tell you what, it is a beautiful day here out in Pennsylvania. Little pull for the boys. Some other general tips when you're going to look at a used car, and especially something like a GTI that has a lot of aftermarket support for it, is just take a look under the hood, check to see what modifications you can just point out by looking through the engine bay and see what interior modifications have been done. A lot of times, if you don't have a lot of service history on a car, you can at least have an idea if someone cared for it or not, just by giving it a look. Obviously, you also want to look at the same things that you would want to look at for any car: brake pads, tires. Try to make sure you look for any rust. This isn't generally a car that has a lot of rust issues, but depending on where you live, obviously that can be more common than other places. Some of the issues that I've run into more recently with my GTI, which I'm not sure if this is really common for all Mark 6s, but they've been mainly fuel related. It was having an issue where I would go to start it and it would work fine, it would start up good, car ran like a champ, and then if I turned the car off and walked away for half an hour or so and then came back and tried to start it again, it would either be slow to get started, or a couple times it actually wouldn't start at all. I believe what it was is my low pressure fuel pump. I haven't gotten around to making that change yet, but I did put a new fuel filter in, as well as a new purge valve off of the intake manifold, which seems to have fixed the issue, at least to a certain extent to this point, but every once in a while it does seem a little bit slow to get started. So I think a fuel pump is probably going to be my next move. But obviously ask the previous owner for service history. If they have a list of the things that they've done, that gives you a better idea as far as if they were up to date on oil changes, when the last time things like brake fluid and coolant have been flushed out, as well as any other preventative maintenance or issues that could have come up. I've had to replace my wheel bearings in this car a couple of times. I've actually been surprised at how often those have gone bad. I'm not sure if it's just a faulty design or what exactly has been going on with that, but that's something that has popped up a couple times for myself. And it's never a bad idea to take a car to a mechanic as well. If you have someone that you trust, to just give it a once over and maybe run it, take it out on the highway, give it a good pull, see how the engine feels. It's always good to get a second opinion, although sometimes people don't always want to pay for that. But to summarize this video, if you're interested in a Mark 6 GTI, you're looking for something reliable, fun to drive, with good aftermarket support, don't necessarily want to make the most power in the world, but maybe you do want to throw a tune on there just so you can get more out of the engine. And especially someone that hasn't driven manual before and is looking for a new car to have as a daily driver that has a manual transmission, I think the GTI has a really nice forgivable platform that would make a great choice for someone that's trying to get into manual for the first time. If you have any questions or recommendations on how to improve my videos, I always really appreciate feedback. Please leave a comment down below. I would love to interact with all of you and see what your opinions are on the Mark 6 GTI. If you were looking at this car and didn't end up going with it, or maybe you did, tell me some of the reasons why you did or didn't end up going this route. And one more time I'll mention, if you want to stay up to date on the content that I have coming out, I really plan to post more regularly on this channel. It's something that I got away from for a long time, but I really do enjoy making these videos and just talking about cars in general. I want to start doing some reviews as well, so I'll leave my email in the link below. I'm in the Philadelphia area, so if anybody has a car that they would like to get a review filmed on, or a feature film or anything like that, I'd love to start bringing some other types of content to the channel along those lines. So again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and I will see you all next video.